Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Jake, Scott, Ben Anderson. Ben, it's time to continue, I suppose. Talking a little college football. BYU headed to Laramie this weekend for a 7 o'clock showdown with the Cowboys. Joining us now, he covers the Pokes for YOsports.com. He's Alex Taylor with us here on Jake and Ben. What's going on, Alex? Thanks for joining us.
Oh, gentlemen, how's it going? Appreciate you guys having me on.
Alex, how surprised is this Wyoming football team to be 0-2?
Very surprised. I'm just, I don't think there's any cutting corners here. I mean, these guys are not thrilled of how this game has started. I mean, Jack Walsh, one of the key offensive linemen, I was talking to him on Monday, and basically, if you would have asked these guys a month ago, they thought they'd be going into this game 0-2, they would obviously not believe you. So you're definitely behind the eight ball here as a Wyoming player. I mean, you needed probably one of those, if not both of those games, to kind of go into this game with some momentum. And obviously BYU has some momentum going into this game. So it's going to be an uphill battle for at least the rest of the non-conference slate for sure.
What has been the biggest negative, I guess, or why is the reason it has been 0-2 so far, if you were to point at the biggest one?
Offense, for sure. I mean, in Tempe against Arizona State, I mean, nothing went right. So I'd say there it was pretty much a combination of everything, I mean, between offense, defense, and special teams. But now that you have kind of that two-game sample, the defense played a lot better in the second half against Idaho, obviously they were starting a backup quarterback, and then they were down to their third string quarterback by the end of that game. But for sure the offense. I was running some numbers when I was writing a story a couple days ago. I mean, Wyoming is 129th in the country in scoring offense. They're averaging 10 points a game right now. I mean, they have 2 touchdowns on the year, and one was in garbage time. And they're 131st out of 133 qualifying teams in passing offense. So they're averaging 102 passing yards a game. So, I mean, that's no matter what way you cut it. I mean, obviously the service academies, Navy and I think Army and Air Force were the two below them. But for any non-service academy team, I mean, that's just not going to cut it, especially with their new offensive scheme. They're trying to be more balanced, and one of the two aspects is not working at all. So that's kind of where they're at.
What about the receiving talent? I saw the coach was frustrated with their inability to get separation. Is that something you think is going to evolve and grow, and bringing back a healthy tight end? Will that help this weekend, or is that going to be an issue all season?
Yeah, I think, John Michael Gillenborg, obviously, he hasn't played at all this season. Him and Evan Savoda are roommates. We've been hearing all offseason about how strong their chemistry is together. So, I mean, that will definitely, if he is able to play, I mean, that'll be a big boost for them. But just the wide receivers in general, I mean, Jay Salvelis kind of mentioned on Monday a little, and you don't want to, lean towards saying, they're making excuses or anything, but he kept kind of making a point of how this is an inexperienced, a young wide receiver group. And a lot of these guys, I mean, it's kind of like a half and half, because a lot of these guys like Alex Brown, Will Pellissier, Jalen Sargent, they've been here forever, and they just haven't done anything. You know what I mean? So now it's kind of them mixed with the younger guys like Justin Stevenson, Tyler King, and Chris Durr Jr., who are all underclassmen, and you want to get these guys involved. But who, at this point right now, I don't know who you trust to get open. I mean, I'm not a coach, obviously, but, I mean, we asked him about that on Monday, hey, when you went back and watched the tape, is Evan making bad reads, or the wide receivers not getting open? I mean, he kind of said it's a combination of both, but he definitely seems frustrated with the offense as a whole. I don't want to single out any position groups, I guess, but that's definitely part of it. Those are some of your most athletic guys on the team, and nobody's getting open. So I don't know how much of that blame falls on the quarterback. I mean, obviously a lot of it naturally, but it's not all just him right now for sure.
So, Alex, I've been covering BYU, Utah, and Utah State for a long time now, and certainly a long time I covered them in the Mountain West Conference and remember the old relationships, really well. And it's been interesting to see how they have come and gone in the last basically 15 years as the Mountain West is not certainly what it was back in 2006, right? So I'm curious, BYU, Wyoming, we're talking, Lavelle with the famous quote, I'd rather lose and live in Provo, I remember the early 2000s when the goalpost disappeared down Main Street in Laramie after, the Cowboys beat Gary Croton and the Cougs. Does this relationship still resonate in Laramie, and how much will that affect what the atmosphere is going to be like?
Yeah, I think, Salvo mentioned on Monday, said this is obviously regardless of the directions of these programs. I mean, obviously Wyoming is very, very, very disappointing start. I mean, BYU's kind of lived up to their expectations so far, I guess you could say. But I mean, Salvo said that this is a special game, obviously for the players, for the program, and for the state. And I think the biggest kicker for this weekend is that, and Salvo's mentioned it plenty of times and brought it up at Mountain West Media Days, but they're not on any future schedules. So, I mean, this is if you're a vintage Wyoming fan or a vintage BYU fan where you've seen this kind of, I don't know if you can even call it a rivalry, but this game might not be around anymore. I mean, that's kind of where it is right now between the two programs. This is it for BYU coming to Laramie, and I mean 2022 was the last time Wyoming was scheduled to go to Provo. So I don't know, unless things change quickly between the ADs and they kind of decide to get something going in the future. I mean, I think that's a big part of this weekend, and I think it should be a pretty good crowd again, despite Wyoming being 0-2.
Alex, I hate to go too big picture with you, but it seems like every team with the handful of a couple of true blue chip markets are having some existential dread about what they're going to look like and where their position is going to be in college football overall. What is that with Wyoming in regards to the Mountain West and conversations about the Pac-12, and what does the future of Wyoming look like in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's. I guess. It really, you hate to say it depends on other schools, but I mean the Oregon State, Washington State scenario is going to have some kind of big implications. I mean, I think the Mountain West is on good footing right now. I mean, I'd say I was just doing the Mountain West power rankings yesterday for football, and it looks kind of like a down year for the Mountain West as a whole. I mean, obviously besides Boise State, UNLV looks pretty good, and Fresno, but I think basketball has kind of lifted this conference up. I mean, obviously they were pretty disappointing in the NCAA tournament last year with getting 5 teams in and only one advancing, or 2 advancing. But I think as a whole, I think the Mountain West is on, like I said, pretty good footing, and Wyoming is definitely a part of that as a founding member. And I see all the time San Diego State fans and Boise State fans complaining basically about having to go to Laramie or, making the trip to Wyoming. And at the end of the day, San Diego State, they tried to go somewhere else and kind of blew up in their face. So it's kind of just a weird time to be kind of that in-between school like San Diego State is, where they have the market, but they also don't have all of the bearings that these power conferences want, I guess, and when it comes to academics and budgeting and stuff like that. So I think, to kind of answer your question, I think Wyoming's safe for now, and I think the Mountain West is kind of in a good position, but I think Gloria Navarez has done a really good job of kind of positioning herself to get this conference into a position where it can be that West Coast conference when it comes to that late slate, especially in football, but in basketball as well.
Tell us a little bit more about Coach Saville. I know he'd probably rather have gotten off to a better start, but what are your first impressions? Or he's been around, right? So what are your impressions of him?
Yeah, he was the defensive coordinator here for 4 years before he got promoted, and Yeah, I think, like you said, I mean, it's definitely been a frustrating start. There was a lot of confidence and a lot of expectations going into this year. I mean, they won 9 games, went 7-0 at home last year, and really, I wrote that was one of the first stories I wrote this year. Is they just couldn't win road games under Craig Bowl, and obviously you kind of go out and you want to kind of set the tone early, and then you go and get blown out 48-7 at Arizona State to start your tenure. So that kind of a deflating start to that. But I think he's a lot more of what you would call a player's coach. I mean, he's in the weight room. Like we wrote a story about that in the offseason too. Of like he's bench pressing with his players. Like as they're working out, they're doing reps together and stuff like that. So he doesn't have a problem being around the guys and kind of being there for them just as a moral or mental support, I guess. I mean, Craig Bowl was kind of the opposite in terms of those player relationships. He was kind of a all business type of guy, so I think that's been the biggest shift. But in terms of staffing and personnel and stuff like that, I mean, it's a lot of it's the same, which I think that is what has Wyoming fans the most frustrated. I think is it was supposed to be pretty seamless transition, from Craig Bowl to Jay Salvo, and just in terms of their defense and obviously their new offensive coordinator. But it's I think he's still optimistic. I mean, he's kind of brought up multiple times how Arizona State looks like a pretty good team. I'm sure you guys are aware in the Big 12 they look kind of better than they have been the last 2 years, and then Idaho's also a pretty good FCS team, not making that excuse or anything, but he brought that up of how they haven't got blown out in the last 2 years. So I think that's definitely a tough schedule to start the year and on paper, but he's optimistic that they can get this turned around, and they're going to have to.
Well, hey, Alex, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it, and hopefully you get to cover a fun one coming up on Saturday. Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Have a good one.